Hello, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome back. We're going to read chapter 11 in our book, The Essenes, Children of the Light, written by Stuart Wilson and Joanna Prentis. And chapter 11 is also the last chapter in part 3, which is all about the Essenes, all the ins and outs, what it's like to live in the Essene community, the way they raise the children, the way they interact with other people, what they do when they travel. And now this one, we're going to be talking about their skills and their powers. So quite intrigued by this particular chapter. And this one is going to be about as long as our previous video, which I think was around 13 or 14 minutes. So I will read this on its own. And then in the next video, we will start part 4, talking about the knowledge and beliefs of the Essenes. All right, so chapter 11, skills and powers. We had already glimpsed some of the abilities of the Essenes and were curious to learn more. Fortunately, the later sessions in the interlife presented an opportunity to follow up this line of inquiry. Once again, Daniel surprised us. We had expected brief references to a variety of skills, but instead got a system of classifying Essene powers. Daniel rattled through the list quite quickly, and we got the impression that this was the standard way of presenting the information to students in the communities. It certainly gave us a feeling of the overall scope and structure of Essene abilities, and how each skill fitted within the whole. So Daniel starts out. The skills can be analyzed or perceived in a number of different ways. There are skills in healing, teaching, researching, traveling, and defending. Also, skills divide according to the beings you are working with. Human beings, angelic beings, or star beings. The skills are also divided by whether they concern consciousness or energy, and also whether they focus on number, sound, heat, light, or color. In other words, the aspects of vibration. The energy skills can be divided again according to whether you are working with earth energy, solar energy, or star energy. All these categories have different skills. The Kalu taught us very much about the use of energies. Some of these skills are quite complex and subtle. For example, in traveling skills, there is a method of moving quickly over distances by so lightening the physical body that you can bound along, only touching the ground here and there. There is also a way of traveling by entering a doorway, which gives you access to another realm, another level, through which distant points can be easily and quickly reached. As to the skills required in the use of these doorways, there are skills in recognizing where these doorways are, keys to open them, and skills in using them. All these doorways need a key to open them. There is usually an opening process, not a physical key, but a process to give you access to them. Sorry, it was broken up kind of weird. And my hair, it is so freezing here, and it's been so misty in the air all day. The fog has just not lifted. So there was a whole range of skills involved in the use of these doorways. These doorways were much used by the ancients, but were far less used in my day, and I think the skills to use them were becoming rarer. This comment on traveling through doorways was interesting, and it seems that naturally occurring vortexes of energy have always existed on the planet. Apparently, these were used as interdimensional doorways to travel vast distances in ancient times. This is the first reference to these doorways we had encountered in an Essene context. So Joanna asks, how did the Essenes choose which skill to teach you? Daniel, generally, our aim is to teach only those skills which will be useful to a person in his or her present life. We analyze the star chart to see where the area of service is, where the skills have been developed in past lives, and where these are coming into play, and thus where they would be useful in service in this lifetime. So not all ones are taught all skills, but some basic skills are taught to all, yes. How to manage the energies on various levels, attunement and meditation skills, and basic skills in communicating with others, yes. But the more specific skills were only taught when it was relevant. In my case, I was taught how to project my consciousness into past and future time. But that was because my three main areas of study were the history of the Essenes, how the Essene Brotherhood was set up by the Kalu, star lore, star wisdom, the stars, and their impact upon human consciousness and human life, which involves star cycles and the mysteries. Those were my three areas of study, and although it was possible to study one of these areas and not have the need to project the consciousness, when you studied all three of these areas, it was definitely a requirement because it was useful to you, and your researches would be quite limited without it. There were some who studied the stars and did not need to probe into the past or the future. But those who studied, as I did, the greater cosmic cycles and the impulses in civilization of mankind were most interested to go either backward to see what happened and what were the roots of our present human condition, and also to go forward and see how various impulses worked out. So the training was flexible in that it took into account the needs of the individual and was adapted to that. Skills were given when they were required, but it was highly selective and not all ones were trained with all skills. The training in some of the most advanced skills was only given in one place, as there were only one or two teachers who could give this training. And towards the end of my life, I began to notice gaps in the provision of some of the rarer skills, as the teachers of these had died and not been replaced. That's so sad. So you could literally just see the way kind of fizzling out. The bit about Daniel projecting his consciousness made me sit up and take notice. I could not recall anyone writing about the Essenes and talking about this. If I could get Daniel to project his consciousness forward, he might be able to give us an Essene perspective on the development of Christianity. I tried to stop my Geminian mind, I am Gemini rising, from cantering forward too quickly along these lines, and fumbled to come up with another question on Essene skills. So Joanna asks, can you tell us more about the healing skills? Daniel, we saw healing as being on many levels. Of course, there are well-established methods, many of these using herbs, ointments, clay, and crystals. But on the highest level, we saw healing as a reattunement to the essential note of the individual. In many cases, illness is the result of a discord, which has been set up within the being of the sick person, so that they are like a musical instrument which has gone out of tune. If the healer can work with the healing angels, they can assist in reattuning the individual to their note. Once they can resonate again fully to their note, the physical level falls quickly into place and healing becomes much easier. So as part of the healing process, we teach the individual how to recognize and sound their note. When you can fully sound your note and vibrate and resonate to it, you become an active participant in your own healing. Joanna, I believe many of the Essenes were powerful healers. When it came to the very advanced Essenes, did they use different methods? Sorry, my hair is driving me crazy in this spot. I've said it before, but this camera picks up every little stray. So Daniel says, yes, for advanced Essenes, a very strong and pure soul, it was possible to heal in a more direct and powerful way. But not even these advanced ones could cure all forms of sickness. Some people they would not attempt to heal and would send away. They would first attune to the inner being of the sick person. If they discovered that they were not yet ready to learn their lesson and release the past, they would send them away. The advanced healers always attuned to the soul of each one before the healing started. And if the soul says, no, there is still something more for me to learn here. And if the soul says, no, there is still something to learn here, it is not the highest good of this individual to be healed now. The healer would always respect that. The soul is responsible for the spiritual learning of the individual, and all healing takes place within the orbit of the soul's consent. Only the soul knows the highest good of the individual, and that good must always take priority over the physical act of healing. Joanna: yes, we understand that the advanced healers would wish to consult the soul in this process. Providing the soul agrees to the healing, how would they then proceed? Daniel says, the healer holds the vision of the person before him as a perfect being, completely aligned with the divine pattern. Whatever illness may be present, this pattern always remains perfect, and the healer affirms that perfection. Then the healer invokes the power of the spirit to flow down into the pattern and to link it with the projection, which is the physical body. Advanced healers are able to do this effectively because they have cleared away all the obstacles within themselves and have become perfect channels for this power. When the spirit moves to manifest perfection, all else in the universe steps aside. The illness, whatever it is, simply gives way to this power. The perfect power-filled pattern and the physical body come together as one, and the person is healed, sometimes instantly. But this is not so much healing in the conventional sense as a restoration of wholeness, the manifestation of the same perfection upon the physical level as exists upon the highest level. Comment by Joanna. This account of the advanced healing methods of the Essenes was a real gift for us, and is yet another example of Daniel's ability to take a straightforward question and lift it into fresh levels of insight. I don't know if Jesus used this technique, but it's certainly a fascinating possibility. Perhaps because I am a therapist, I found this part of Daniel's account quite a moving experience, and could only manage a general question after this to keep the session going. So Joanna says, thank you for sharing that with us, Daniel. And now, can you tell us about any other special skills which the Essenes had? Daniel says, there are a number of special skills, and I will mention only a few of these. There is inner vision and the seeing of the aura. The aura is not seen by all who have the inner sight, but is an extension of that skill. There is also inner hearing, the ability to read the cosmic records, and the ability to attune to high angelic beings and high star beings and the energies that these beings focus. Then there is the ability to work with earth energies in practical ways, using crystals and sacred forms. These are only a few of the Essene skills. The Kalu had many more skills also, but despite their best efforts, the knowledge and practice of some skills were beginning to die. The best teachers among the Essenes were no longer able to reach the highest levels in the use of these skills. I saw that as a natural progression. Certain skills are perfected in every age, every cycle, and when the cycle is over, the skills decay. They may be practiced still by the highest sages. I don't think they are ever entirely lost, but the regular use of them passes out of human memory and experience. This has happened before, and I see the signs of it again. In the old land in the West, they perfected the working with crystals, for example. Whatever skills we now have are only a fragment of what was regularly practiced then. I do not mourn the passing of old skills, because for the master souls of mankind, the greatest teachers and sages, this knowledge lives on. But it may pass out of human experience for a while, and that seems to be the pattern of things. As to the skills that we did practice in my day, I knew only the outline of many of them and could not perceive all the skills clearly. To know the real extent of any skill, one would have to practice that skill to a very high level. Those beginning at it and within the middle range of mastering it cannot yet see the full extent of it. One who has practiced that skill for many years and is adept in using it is in the best position to be able to determine the limits of that skill. We would say that all skills have limitations, and the wise master of that skill knows the boundaries and works always happily and harmoniously within them, not trying to exceed the inherent potential of that skill, what that skill is able to do, because that would be mere foolishness. We were well taught and knew both the advantages and disadvantages of each skill. Some took much energy or much out of the physical body, and some took from the etheric or emotional or mental bodies. So there was a price to pay for using each skill, and we were clear in knowing what the price was, and were able thus to work within our limits and not overstretch ourselves through ignorance. Joanna, was the price of your skill the frailness of your etheric body? And Daniel says yes, because to stretch your consciousness out in time was to stretch yourself thin, like a sinew is stretched thin. I was glad to pay the price and do the work, yes, but we all knew that for every form of work there is a cost. As my work progressed, I found I was getting frailer at the etheric level. It was one of the problems with that work. Joanna, and you would carry that forward through several lives? And Daniel says yes. Joanna, was sound used in a number of ways? And Daniel says yes. In defense, as we have said, but also to balance and sustain the energies within the body. So he just said that they used sound to defend themselves. And he says that he mentioned that, but I don't remember reading that. And I think we're going to go into that in greater depth later on, how they used sound to defend themselves and their communities. Quite interesting. So to balance and sustain the energies within the body, and in chanting, prayers, and invocations. There were many ways to use sound. The use of sound for the defense of the community is discussed in chapter 15. Joanna, and what training did Joseph have? Was it different from yours? Daniel says Joseph had a fairly general training because he had to know a little bit about everything. He was very focused on what was necessary down here on Earth, whereas he said I could fly off into the cosmos more easily. And here he chuckles. And he had this underpinning of the work and the responsibility, a heavier burden than mine. So his training was more direct and practical, I think. Okay, so that completes chapter 11 as well as part 3. And in the next video, we will start part 4, talking about the Essenes' knowledge and their beliefs. And chapter 12, we're going to be reading about exploring the Essene knowledge. And looking at this chapter, it's not very long at all. The Essene library is very interesting. I may read 12 and 13 together because they are pretty short. We'll see where that takes us when we start next time, time-wise. So thank you all very much for joining me. I love you all so much. And until I see you again, take care of you and take care of those around you. Bye-bye until next time.